The locksmith truck was still parked outside when I pulled up in my funeral clothes. I had driven straight from the cemetery, eyes dry, heels dusty, mum barely 6 hours in the ground. The house looked the same, pale yellow siding, the rose bushes she planted the year I turned 12. But something felt wrong before I even opened the car door. I walked up the front path and reached into my purse for my key. The same key I had used for 30 years. I slid it into the lock and turned. Nothing. It wasn't my lock anymore. A man in a blue uniform was packing up his tools on the porch steps. He didn't look at me. He just snapped his toolbox shut and walked to his truck like this was any ordinary job on any ordinary day. Maybe for him it was. That's when Aaron stepped through the front door. He was still in his funeral suit, holding a brand new keyring, looking at me the way you look at a stranger who has knocked on the wrong door. Politely cold, completely certain. The house is legally mine now, he said. The neighbors across the street were watching from their porch. I could feel their eyes. I could feel everything all at once, pressing down on me in the afternoon sun while my mother's roses needed water and my brother held keys that used to be mine. He didn't even hesitate when he said it, like he had practiced. I stood on the front path and stared at him. My mind was moving slowly, trying to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. I asked him calmly what he was talking about. Mom updated her paperwork months ago, Aaron said, crossing his arms. The house belongs to me. I asked him when. I asked him how. He gave me a look that said I should already know, that my confusion was somehow my fault. Maybe if you'd been here more, she would have trusted you. Maybe then you would have known. There it was, the guilt, aimed right at the place where I was most tender. I had lived 3 states away for work. I had called every single week. I had flown back every time Mom asked. But Aaron had been here, and now he was using that fact like a crowbar. He bent down and picked up a small cardboard box sitting by the door. He handed it to me. Inside were a few of my things, a photo album, a cardigan I kept at the house, some mail. He had packed it for me, without asking, without warning. That's when I understood. This was not grief talking. This had been planned well before my mother was in the ground. He says he's meeting the estate attorney tomorrow. I drove to a motel 2 miles away and sat on the edge of the bed with the cardboard box in my lap. I didn't open it. I just let my mind go back to the last month of Mom's life. She had been weaker in those final weeks, moving slowly, stopping to rest on the couch. But her mind had been sharp. She remembered everything. She asked about my work, my apartment, whether I was eating enough. She was still fully herself. One evening, when I was washing dishes and she was sitting at the kitchen table, she had said something I hadn't thought much of at the time. Things will be fair, she said. I've made sure of it. I thought she meant the funeral arrangements or maybe the jewelry. I nodded and kept washing dishes. And then there was the afternoon the attorney came to the house. Mom had asked me to go pick up her prescription while he was there. She said she needed privacy for the paperwork. I thought it was medical. I didn't push. Now, sitting in that motel room, I thought about that afternoon differently. What had she signed? What had she planned? I picked up my phone. I called the attorney's office. The phone rang 4 times before a receptionist answered. I asked about my mother's estate file. The woman was polite but firm. She couldn't share details without proper documentation proving my standing. Being the daughter wasn't, by itself, enough. I thanked her and called back with a simpler request. An in-person meeting with Mr. Felton, the attorney my mother had used for years. 2 minutes on hold, then a confirmation. He had an opening the following morning at 10. I wrote down the time and address. Then I opened my laptop and searched the county probate court's public records database. It took about 15 minutes. My brother's name appeared in a probate filing. The date stamp was the morning after my mother passed away. Not a week later. Not after some period of reflection. The very next morning. He had filed before most of the family had been notified of her death. Before I had even booked my flight home. He had sat with his grief, if that's what it was, for one night, and then he had moved. I stared at the screen for a long time. The timestamps didn't lie. Whatever Aaron told himself about why he had done this, the record showed exactly how quickly he had acted. Attorney agrees to see me in person. Mr. Felton's office smelled like old books, and coffee. He was a thin man in his 60s with careful eyes and a very straight back. He shook my hand and asked me to sit. A folder was already open on his desk. He seemed uncomfortable. Not unfriendly, just uncomfortable. The way someone looks when they're sitting in the middle of something difficult and aren't sure which way it will fall. He told me a deed transfer had been filed 6 months ago. My mother had signed it. The document was legitimate, properly witnessed, and legally recorded with the county. According to that deed, my brother Aaron was listed as sole owner of the property. The bottom of my stomach dropped. 6 months ago, she had still been well enough to travel. She had still been cooking Sunday dinners. I thought about her saying things will be fair. I thought about Aaron handing me that box of belongings. I kept my face still and asked if there was anything else I should know. He looked down at the folder. He straightened a paper that didn't need straightening. There is something else, he said quietly. He looked back up at me. The attorney says there's also something else. Mr. Felton reached into the folder and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was cream-colored, thick, sealed with wax. My mother's handwriting was on the front, to be opened only if access to property is denied. He explained that my mother had left this with him under specific instructions. It was not to be opened unless and until I was denied entry to the house. She had written that condition herself and had it notarized. I thought about what that meant. She had sat across from this attorney and thought through the possibility that Aaron might lock me out. And she had planned for it. She hadn't warned me, but she had prepared something, sealed it, and left it with a man she trusted. My mother, who had learned to be careful with everything, money, words, the people she loved, had not left this to chance. She had anticipated the cardboard box on the porch. She had anticipated the locksmith truck. She had sat here, sick and tired, and still thought 3 steps ahead. Mr. Felton held the envelope toward me. My heart was moving fast. I could feel it in my throat. "Shall I open it?" he asked quietly. I nodded. He opens the sealed envelope. The document inside was 2 pages long. Mr. Felton read the key sections aloud while I followed on my own copy, which he slid across the desk. My mother had created what is called a life estate arrangement. Under this structure, Aaron had been given the title to the house. He was, on paper, the owner. But the document also established something equally important. I had been granted full occupancy rights to the property. That meant I had the legal right to live there, to enter at any time, and to remain for as long as I chose. More than that, the document included a controlling interest clause. If Aaron ever wanted to sell the property, he could not do so without my written consent. I didn't just have the right to stay in that house. I had veto power over its entire future. Mom had split the arrangement down the middle. He got the title. I got the control. I read it a second time to be sure. "This is recorded with the county," Mr. Felton said. "It's legally binding and enforceable." Aaron had changed the locks on a house he could not legally bar me from. He had handed me that box as if he had won. And he had no idea any of this existed. I realized he doesn't know this. I went back to the house the next morning. I had slept only a little, but I was rested in a different way, the kind that comes when confusion finally becomes clarity. I parked on the street, walked up the path, and knocked on the front door. Aaron opened it. He was in a t-shirt and sweatpants, holding a mug of coffee. My mother's blue mug with the chipped handle she had refused to throw away for years. He looked at me the way you look at something you've already decided isn't your problem. "You need to leave," he said. "I'm not leaving," I said. "And I'd like you to read something." I held out the copy of the document Mr. Felton had given me. Aaron didn't take it at first. Then, slowly, he did. He leaned against the doorframe and read. I watched his face carefully, the small furrow between his eyebrows, the way his jaw tightened, the moment his eyes stopped moving and he went back to reread a paragraph. He looked up. His hand slipped, and the paper nearly fell from his fingers. Not replaced by anything yet, just gone. Like a light switched off. "This isn't possible," he said. His voice was quiet. "It's recorded with the county," I said. "I have the filing number." He whispers, "This isn't possible." He accused me of forging it. He said it the way people say things when they already know they're wrong, but aren't ready to stop fighting. His voice had an edge in it, sharp but slightly hollow, like he was trying to sound certain while the ground shifted under him. I didn't raise my voice. I told him the document had been prepared by Mr. Felton, the same attorney our mother had used for 20 years. I told him it had been notarized and filed with the county clerk's office 6 months ago. I gave him the filing reference number. I told him he could look it up himself on the county website. He went inside. I heard him on the phone. I could hear his voice rising and falling in the hallway. Low at first, then sharper, then quieter again. He was calling his lawyer. I stood on the porch and waited. The roses needed water. I made a note of that. About 12 minutes later, Aaron came back to the door. His face had changed. The edge was gone. What was left was something harder to look at, a man who had believed something completely and just discovered he was wrong. He says the clause is valid, Aaron said. He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at somewhere just past my shoulder. His lawyer confirms the clause is valid. He shifted his approach. That was the next thing he tried. He put the legal arguments aside and came at me from a different angle, emotion. He told me that Mom had only signed the occupancy clause because I had pressured her, that she had been worried about upsetting me and had agreed to things she didn't really want. He said she had mentioned feeling guilty about my living situation, that she had felt like she owed me something. I let him finish. Then I thought about my mother. I thought about her sitting across from Mr. Felton in his office with its old book smell, making decisions with a sealed envelope in her hand. I thought about the way she had chosen her words her entire life, carefully, deliberately, never doing anything out of guilt alone. She had survived things that would have broken other people. She had made hard choices her whole life and stood behind them. The idea that she had been pressured into a legal document was almost laughable. She wasn't pressured, I said. She planned this. She planned all of it. Aaron shook his head. I told him I was coming back inside the house and that he could either accept that or we could take the next steps legally. He didn't move for a moment. Then he stepped back from the door. I walked inside. I demand to re-enter the house legally. Aaron called the police. I don't think he expected what happened next. 2 officers arrived about 20 minutes after I came inside. Aaron met them at the door and explained that he was the owner of the property and that I had entered without his permission. He showed them the deed with his name on it. He was calm, organized, confident again, back in the mode he was comfortable in. Then I showed them the occupancy rights document. The officers stepped aside and talked quietly for a few minutes. One of them made a phone call. When they came back, the taller of the 2 spoke directly to Aaron. Sir, an occupancy rights clause of this nature supersedes a simple lock change. She has the legal right to be in this property. Aaron's jaw tightened. So there's nothing you can do. Not in terms of removing him, no. This is a civil matter. If you'd like to contest the document, you'd need to do that through the courts. The whole conversation happened in the front hallway while the neighbor from across the street, Mr. Okafor, who had lived there since before I was born, watched from his driveway. I saw Aaron notice him watching. I saw the color rise in his face. This isn't over, Aaron said after the officers left. He said it to the wall more than to me. He vows this isn't over. Once Aaron went upstairs, I walked through the house slowly. I had grown up here. I knew every room, every creak in the floor, every place where the wallpaper had started to lift at the corner. I knew where Mom kept her important papers, where she stored the good silverware, where the box of family photos lived. The silverware was gone. I opened the cabinet where Mom kept her financial files, the accordion folder she had organized every year since my father left, with sections labeled in her careful handwriting. The folder was still there, but several sections were empty. Documents that should have been there were missing. That's when it stopped feeling like panic and started feeling like theft. I walked to her bedroom. Her jewelry box was on the dresser. I opened it. Her wedding ring was gone. So was the gold bracelet her mother had given her. The pearl earrings that were supposed to be mine, she had told me so herself, sitting at this very dresser, were not there. I stood in the middle of her room and felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just about the house anymore. Things had been removed. Documents, items of value, before I came back, possibly even before the funeral. I took out my phone and started taking photographs of every empty space. I request a formal estate inventory. 2 days later, a court-appointed estate reviewer came to the property and conducted a formal inventory. I had requested it through Mr. Felton, who filed the paperwork on my behalf. Aaron was not pleased, but he had no legal grounds to refuse it. The review took most of the morning. By early afternoon, the picture was becoming very clear. Beyond the missing jewelry and documents, the financial review flagged something else. In the 18 months before my mother's death, large sums of money had been withdrawn from her accounts. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious. They came in smaller amounts, sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly, spread out in a pattern that could almost look like regular expenses. Could almost. The reviewer noted that Aaron had been listed as an authorized account user since Mom's diagnosis. The withdrawals began 3 months after he was added. There was a phrase used in the report, assistance transfers. Money moved with the explanation that it was being used to help with her care and daily needs. Some of it surely was, but the total amount far exceeded what her medical costs and living expenses could account for. The timeline of the withdrawals overlapped almost exactly with the period during which the deed had been updated. Timeline overlaps with deed update. That evening I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and let my memory move backward. I was looking for something I had missed, something that had been there all along. And then I found it. 2 years ago, during one of my visits, Mom and I had been sitting on the back porch after dinner. It was a warm night. She had a glass of lemonade. She looked out at the yard and said, almost to herself, "I wonder sometimes if Aaron is worried about money." I had asked what she meant. "He seems anxious," she said. "More than usual." I had thought nothing of it at the time. Aaron had always been the more anxious of us. I assumed she was picking up on something ordinary, a difficult month at work, some everyday stress. I changed the subject. We talked about her garden. But now, sitting in her kitchen with the financial records in front of me and her jewelry missing from her room, I heard that sentence completely differently. She had been noticing something real. She had been watching carefully. She had seen what was happening. And then, quietly, deliberately, in the way she did everything, she had done something about it. Forensic accounting review begins. The estate attorney arranged for a forensic accountant to review the full financial picture. The numbers didn't scream. They whispered. And that was worse. Her name was Patricia Walsh, and she was thorough in the way that only people who love details can be thorough. She spent 3 days going through records. Her report did not use the word theft. What it said was that there was a pattern of financial influence inconsistent with standard caregiving support. It said the transfers showed evidence of directed spending that primarily benefited a third party, meaning Aaron, rather than my mother. It also noted that during the final 8 months of Mom's illness, the pace of the transfers had increased significantly. The amounts had gotten larger as she got weaker. There was no proof that Mom had been mentally incapacitated at any point. She had been sharp to the end. Mr. Felton had confirmed this, and I knew it myself from every conversation we had had. That was actually important. It meant that whatever had happened had not been simple exploitation of someone who didn't understand what she was signing. Mom had understood. She had also, quietly, been arranging the counterweight. Still, the pattern was clear. The report weakened every part of Aaron's story. A neighbor came to see me that same evening. A neighbor comes forward. It was Mr. Okafor, the man who had watched from his driveway the day the police came. He knocked on the front door and held his hat in his hands in the way of someone who has been thinking about whether to come for a while and has finally decided to. He told me that during the last year of my mother's chemotherapy, Aaron had visited frequently. More than frequently, sometimes several times a week. Mr. Okafor would see his car in the driveway early in the morning or late at night. He had thought, at first, that Aaron was being a devoted son. He had thought well of him for it. But he had also heard, more than once, raised voices coming through the front window. Arguments. He couldn't make out all the words, but he heard enough. He heard the word security several times. He heard Aaron say on one occasion something like, "I need to know the future is protected." He told me he hadn't wanted to get involved. He told me he hoped he was doing the right thing by telling me now. I thanked him sincerely. I offered him tea. He declined, said he needed to get back, but he shook my hand warmly before he left. I understood Aaron a little better after that conversation. Not excused, just understood. I confronted him privately. I found Aaron sitting in the living room that night, in the armchair that had been Dad's before Dad left and had become, by some unspoken agreement, the chair that nobody sat in except when they needed to think. He looked tired, smaller than usual, somehow. I sat on the couch across from him. I didn't come in ready to fight. I came in ready to listen, which is a different thing. I told him what Mr. Okafor had told me. I told him what the financial report had found. I told him all of it calmly, the way you tell someone a fact rather than an accusation. He was quiet for a long time. Then something in him shifted. I saw it. It was the kind of shift that happens when a person stops performing and starts actually talking. I always thought you were the successful one, he said. The one who got out. The one she was proudest of. I waited. I was scared, he said. Of you, he said. I was scared of you. I was scared that when she was gone, I would end up with nothing and you would come back and get everything, and you hadn't even been here. It was sad. It was genuinely sad. And it was also not an excuse. But it was the truth. And the truth, at least, was a place to start. He admits he changed the locks out of fear. He kept talking. Once he started, it was like something that had been held under pressure finally found a way out. He told me he had believed, when he got the deed transfer, that it meant everything. He thought the house was his in every way that mattered, that he could make all the decisions, control what happened to it, sell it if he chose, keep me out if he wanted. He had never had a lawyer look at the full document. He had seen his name on the title and stopped reading. I didn't know about the occupancy clause, he said. I swear I didn't know. Mom knew you didn't know, I said. He looked at me. She put it in there exactly because she understood how you think, I said. She gave you what you wanted and she protected me at the same time. She balanced it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, so she outmaneuvered both of us. She just knew us, I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. He looked at the carpet. He looked like a man who had just understood something he should have understood a long time ago. There's more, I said. I reveal there's more. I slid the second section of the estate document across the coffee table toward him. It was a clause that Mr. Felton had not opened at the initial meeting because the conditions for it had not yet been triggered. It stated that in the event of any attempt to forcibly remove me from the property, including changing the locks, filing unlawful eviction paperwork, or any action a court determined was designed to deny me my occupancy rights, a partial trust would be released in my favor. The trust was funded with a separate account my mother had quietly maintained for years. Not a fortune, but significant, enough to change the math of everything Aaron had been calculating. By changing the locks on the day of her funeral, Aaron had triggered the clause automatically. The trust had already been triggered, the moment you changed the locks. By the time I walked into Mr. Felton's office, Aaron read the document slowly, going back twice to the paragraph about the trigger condition. The day I changed the locks, he said. Yes, I said. He put the paper down. He sat back in the armchair. For a long moment he said nothing. He was doing the math, going back through his decisions, finding exactly where each one had cost him. He realizes he financially harmed himself. He tried to negotiate his way out quietly. That was his next move, and I had expected it. He offered to split the property value equally if I agreed to drop any further inquiry into the financial transfers. He said we could handle it between ourselves, keep it private, avoid anything that would drag Mom's name into a formal proceeding. He said it like he was doing me a favor. I looked at him for a moment. Then I told him that I appreciated the offer, but that I wasn't interested in a private arrangement that swept things under a rug. The financial transfers were part of the estate record now. The forensic report existed. I hadn't created those facts. I had only uncovered them. I also told him something that seemed to surprise him. I didn't want to destroy him. That was not what I had come back for. If I wanted revenge, I would have taken everything. I had come back for my mother's funeral, and everything after that had simply been me refusing to accept a lie. What do you want then? He asked. I want this handled correctly, I said. Formally, with a third party in the room. He looked like he wanted to argue. He looked at the clause document still on the table. Then he looked away. I proposed formal mediation instead. The mediation session was held 10 days later in a neutral conference room in town. The mediator was a woman named Carol Briggs, no relation, who had handled dozens of estate disputes and who had the calm authority of someone who has heard every version of every family story. Aaron and I sat on opposite sides of the table. His attorney was there. Mr. Felton was there on my behalf. For the first hour, things were tense. Aaron stuck to the edges of his original story, and I presented the documents and the financial report without emotion. Then Carol asked us each a single question. What did your mother want? And that changed the air in the room, because we both knew. We had known our mother. We knew she had not wanted this. Not the locked door, not the box of belongings, not the attorneys, not any of it. She had wanted balance. She had tried to create it through paperwork when she realized she couldn't create it through conversation. Aaron talked about growing up feeling overlooked. I talked about the guilt of being the one who left. Carol let us talk. She didn't rush it. By the end of the second hour, the outlines of a solution were on the table. Something our mother, I think, would have recognized. Mediator proposes structured co-ownership. The solution was straightforward. I would purchase Aaron's share of the property at fair market value, determined by an independent appraiser. The financial transfers would be addressed separately through a negotiated reduction of what he received from the sale. Not a legal judgment, but a formal acknowledgement built into the settlement agreement. He would walk away with a fair amount. Not everything he had imagined, but fair. In exchange, I would not pursue further legal action regarding the financial history, and the estate would be settled cleanly. Aaron sat with the proposal for 2 days. He called his attorney 3 times. He called me once late at night and asked if I was sure about the appraisal process. I said yes. On the 3rd day, he came to the house. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Mom had sat with her lemonade and wondered aloud if Aaron was worried about money. He had the settlement papers in front of him. His attorney had reviewed every line. He picked up the pen. He held it for a moment, looking at the document. Then he signed. I signed after him. We did not shake hands. We didn't hug. But it was not hostile. It was quiet, the way things are when 2 people have finally, exhaustedly, arrived at the same place. He signs. The paperwork moved quickly after that. The county records were updated within 2 weeks. My name replaced the shared arrangement. I became the sole owner of the house, not through a fight, not through a court battle, not through anything dramatic. Through a settlement and a signature and a process that had been, at every step, documented and clean. Mr. Felton called to confirm when the final recording went through. It's done, he said. The property is yours. I thanked him. I asked if he had known all along what my mother had set in motion, if he had understood, when she sat in his office 6 months before she passed, exactly what she was building. He was quiet for a moment. She was very clear about what she wanted, he said. She told me she didn't want a war. She wanted a structure that would make a war unnecessary. She said she knew her children. I thought about that, the way she had sat in his office with that sealed envelope and thought through every possible move. The way a chess player thinks 3 steps ahead. She had been ill. She had been tired. And she had still done all of this with total clarity. She didn't know us, I said. I stood in the living room after I hung up and looked at the room around me. Public record updates. I become sole owner. Aaron called me a week after the paperwork was finalized. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me answer. He asked how I was doing. It was a careful question, the kind that contains a larger question inside it. I told him I was fine. I asked how he was. He said he was adjusting. He said he had started working with a financial advisor, which was something he probably should have done years ago. He said he had found an apartment in town, which was smaller than he wanted, but manageable. Then he asked me something directly. Why didn't you go further? You had the financial report. You had everything. You could have taken me to court. You could have gone after the money. I thought about how to answer that. Because I didn't want to spend the next 3 years of my life fighting you, I said. And because Mom didn't want that either. She didn't leave that sealed envelope because she wanted me to destroy you. She left it because she wanted me to be protected. Those are different things. There was silence on his end. Changing the locks was cruel, he said finally. I knew it was cruel when I was doing it. It was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get. I accepted it. He asks why I didn't destroy him. On a Tuesday morning, I woke up early and walked through the house before the sun was fully up. Room to room, just looking. The kitchen with Mom's chipped blue mug still on its hook. The hallway where the wallpaper lifted at the corner by the light switch. The back porch where she had sat with her lemonade and said things I should have listened to more carefully. I stopped in her bedroom doorway and stood there for a while without going in. I thought about the moment I had stood on the front path in my black funeral clothes with a key that no longer fit. I remembered how lost that felt, how small, how completely unprepared I was for what my brother had done. But my mother had been prepared. She had thought ahead, stayed quiet, and put the structure in place before it was needed. She had known Aaron's fear and she had known my strength, and she had built something that accounted for both of us. She had done it while she was sick, while she was tired, while she was dying, and she had done it with complete clarity. The key worked this time, and the house was mine now. Not because I fought harder or louder, because she had loved us both well enough to plan for exactly who we were. I walked inside and finally let myself cry, not from grief, but from something that felt very close to gratitude.